Every so often, a space game comes along that promises to be extremely deep and very much unlike anything else on the market. Alliance Spaceguard then is one such game. It's currently in development with some private testing going on, yet there is so much information on this game that it's a genuine pleasure to see. The footage you see on the screen right here is from the game during its development cycle, which is still ongoing by the way, and there's been many of these videos over the course of the years. Obviously, some of the footage here is in very early stages, particularly the models and other visual assets, so don't judge it too harshly based on assets alone. There's obviously a lot more going on here. This is a very involved and very complex game. Ultimately, that means that there's so much to cover that I can't possibly talk about all of it. But here's an overview of the game, and I've got to say I'm very interested in this title. Alliance Spaceguard then places players inside a massive sandbox, a space simulation game that provides players with a realistic experience of commanding a spaceship. The galaxy itself is procedurally generated and uses real-world physics on a one-to-one scale. Ultimately, the game is very much about physics, so perhaps consider Kerbal Space Program combined with other first-person space-focused games. There's a lot going on here. At the heart of Alliance Spaceguard is the player's ship. This is the CSN F9 Carbon Arrow. It's a frigate-class vessel. So as we go through this video, I'm going to break it down into sections, as really there's quite a lot going on here, and it's going to need to be broken down in that way. We're starting with the ship then, and this is very interesting because each component is subject to unique patterns of wear and tear, and this requires players to engage in thoughtful management and regular maintenance to ensure operational integrity. The game's progression allows for upgrades and enhancements, providing access to the galaxy's more daunting and remote regions. Now, Alliance Spaceguard is grounded in robust and real-world physics. There's a lot going on here in terms of Newtonian flight dynamics and gravitational interactions, and this really demands that players meticulously plan their maneuvers and get celestial mechanics in mind. That comes right back to my mention of kind of relating some of this to a Kerbal Space Program. The concept of jump points is also there, and this facilitates interstellar travel. These, however, are not simply the case of just flying at a wormhole and popping out the other end. Instead, they require precise navigation to utilize these instantaneous transit pathways. And yes, even when it comes to the jump points, real-world physics are very much present. And yes, that includes things such as the conservation of momentum. Now, the developers have said that advanced flight control systems are going to be a cornerstone of the overall gaming experience. And this will mean manually flying your ship, but it also means a sophisticated autopilot which should be capable of managing the ship's attitude and thrust in response to conditions as they change around the ship, alongside the various players' different inputs. So ultimately then, the bottom line here is if you're looking for a very complicated simulated experience of space travel, then Alliance Spaceguard is probably going to be it. There's nothing arcadey about this space travel, and certainly no hand-holding either. So the game had its inception all the way back in 2014, nearly 10 years ago at this point, and in that time the game has achieved a lot of developmental milestones. Keep in mind this is developed by a very small team. Special attention has been placed on the galaxy itself, and yes, as I mentioned early on, this is a procedurally generated galaxy, but it does feature, that's not necessarily a bad thing, that's in fact a good thing. Much like with Elite Dangerous, it does have realistic distances and celestial bodies and masses. Again, that invites comparisons with Kerbal Space Program. And this really does mean that players are free to explore a massive amount of different star systems, and each of them with unique characteristics and challenges. At least that's the goals that the developers have in mind, and I'm very curious to see how all of that is actually going to be implemented. After all, space is big, there's a vast amount of different planetary bodies out there, and keeping all of that interesting is certainly going to be a challenge. Now, when flying around space, it's far more than just pointing your ship in a direction and enabling the thrusters. In fact, players are going to have to plan out detailed maneuvers to basically get themselves from A to B. And real-world orbital mechanics are certainly going to play a part in this. It means that the maneuvers planner is going to be a big focus of the game when it comes to getting around, and that means a lot more complexity. Yet, if all that sounds a bit too much for you, there's also a planning system that can automatically generate routes to destinations, and that will make the game a little bit more accessible without diluting its complexity. And if you're wondering if that automated system is being put in merely to dumb the game down, well, it turns out that's not the case. These features are absolutely essential for introducing realistic NPC traffic. So, even though this is a single-player title, you won't be flying out there alone in the void of space. Now, talking about space, what will you be doing out there other than flying? Well, there is some mission scope here, as well as player autonomy. The developers have said that the plan is for players, as in their role as captain within the Space Guard, to undertake a variety of missions, and these would cover things from routine patrols to complex support operations and even law enforcement where applicable. The missions are going to be dynamically generated, ensuring a continuous stream of challenges and different events that evolve with the player's progression through the game. But the idea isn't to merely focus on what's going on outside in space, but also what's going on inside the ship, and this will be a massive part of the game. Ultimately, complete control over the ship operations, maintenance and upgrades allows players to customize their journey and really adapt their vessel to meet the different missions and demands that are out there. Now, like I said earlier on, there's a massive amount of information on this game, all in development at the moment, but these videos and all the rest of the published information is quite a lot to go through, so I may have missed a few bits here. So I'm very curious actually to see how the mission system is going to play out. Are these going to be handcrafted missions, or are they going to be procedurally generated? Either way, there's going to be a lot that players will need to get involved in to maintain interest. But that said, sandbox games, especially of this nature, again, third time mentioning, do consider Kerbal Space Program and all its variety of physics. These can actually present a challenge in themselves, maintaining a long-term interest. If put together and executed well, orbital mechanics can be a very engaging gameplay element to, well, really play with. Who'd have thought that? Ultimately then, Alliance Space Guard really is envisioned, apparently, to evolve into a comprehensive space simulation game. The emphasis is very much going to be on ship management and systems management, and as the game develops, future updates are anticipated to introduce more complex elements to space warfare even. And if the developer manages to pull that off, that is going to be very interesting indeed, because space warfare with full-on orbital mechanics is something we've not seen much of in the space game genre. As yet, there doesn't appear to be a release date for the game. However, as I said, there's a whole bunch of contact with the developer going on. They're regularly publishing new information, so do check out both the website as well as their YouTube channel to keep up to date with this game. And of course, I will make a new video on this as soon as anything new and interesting does happen. This one, in my opinion, is certainly very much worth keeping an eye on. My thanks to everyone for watching this video all the way to the end, and for those of you still here, why not check out the other video on the screen right now. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.